Welcome to Scale Model Basics. I'm Tim Kidwell, and we're going to talk about assembling metal miniatures. Metal miniature models come in a number of different forms, and the most common that you're going to find are probably miniature figures in 54 millimeter, 30 millimeter, 28 millimeter. You'll also find metal miniature models of cars, a lot of times in 1/43 scale, or airplanes. They're a bit more uncommon than they used to be, but 1/72 scale, 1/144 scale. When you get into wargaming miniatures, where they're getting a lot smaller, you will find many more metal miniatures than you would necessarily in just your traditional scale modeling sort of circles. In any case, what we're going to concentrate on today is this 54 millimeter figure and the tools and techniques that you'll use to put it all together. So first off, let's go through some of the tools that you'll need. Now, a lot of the tools that you'll use with a metal miniature are the same sort of tools that you use with a plastic model. For instance, flat cutters. You'll want a file, a metal file, not a sanding stick, but a nice one that has a taper at the end so you can get into some of the tight spots. You'll want a hobby knife. You'll want a more utility sort of knife, a pin vise with a drill bit, some brass rod, sculpting tools, and some two-part epoxy putty. The other thing that you'll need is glue, and I prefer when putting together metal miniatures to use a combination of two-part epoxy and then gel super glue. So the first step is looking at all of the parts that we have for the kit and determining what needs to be cleaned up or repaired. So let's take a look at the main body of the figure. This is a really clean fig. We can see that there's just a mold seam from the spin casting on his shoulder there, and you can go ahead and you can follow that seam right on down. Now, a lot of this can be hidden under paint. That one there would probably be a little bit obvious, but then it goes down his torso. In through here with this detail, while you can kind of make it out, a lot of that detail just sort of takes, that mold seam away, and that's going to disappear once you start detailing it. So I wouldn't worry about that so much. Especially with nice detail like this, you don't want to eliminate any of that. Coming down through here, they do a good job of bringing that seam along the edge of this this kilt. So we're all right there, and it disappears down here into that foot. So no problems there. Again, that mold seam is just right along there. Not super obvious once you get down in through here. But if you see a mold seam like that, like this one here, what you can do is you can just come in with your knife blade and very carefully with the back edge of the blade, just scrape it along that seam. Now, what you will notice is that it will slightly change the color of the metal from this kind of dull sheen to being just a little bit shinier. And that's okay, because that's going to disappear underneath your primer and underneath your paint. Not a big deal. It doesn't take much at all, because this metal is very soft, to eliminate something like a mold seam. Now, you could also come in with that file that I showed you earlier and very lightly just go ahead and touch that seam up. That wouldn't be a problem either. You just want to make sure that you're not flattening out or eliminating any detail that you want the figure to keep. You don't really need to grind really hard to get that to go away. On some metal miniatures, what you might find are things that are called gates, which if you were to look at a plastic sprue, they would be the little nubs, right? The gates, help during the spin casting process to fill the parts out, but you might also see what we have here, which is some flash, right? And you can easily cut away flash with a heavy utility knife. You could do it with your hobby knife too, but a utility knife I find is better just because it's got a little bit more heft to it. When the blade is new, it cuts very nicely, and you're able to clean that up really easily. If you see that there's a mold seam that's still there, you can come back in with your hobby knife, and I'll just show you here. I'm not too particularly worried about it, but you could go ahead and scrape that. To me, those are going to be pretty well hidden just by the shape of the figure. I don't see any gates really on any of these parts. There's a little bit of a mold seam that's there that will come through and we can clean up with a file or the back of a knife. But really, the manufacturer did a great job getting rid of the gates before packaging. Something you might find when you're looking at your parts, one of them might be bent. And this is a pretty severe bend. But what's nice about metal miniatures is that this metal is soft. They used to be lead. It's mostly tin now. White metal is what they call it. But you can pretty easily bend these parts back into shape if they are misshapen from packaging or just, shipping in transit. See, that went from being, a 30-degree angle, 45-degree angle, to being just straightened right back out again. So if you see something that's bent, don't be too concerned about it. You should be able to bend it right back into shape. Something I want to point out, so on this quiver here, these you may mistake for those being gates. I certainly did when I first looked at it. You will often not have instructions with your metal figs because it's such a low parts count, in this case 6 parts. The manufacturers pretty much think that you're going to be able to figure out what's going on with that figure. When you see something like this, and don't jump to conclusions that this is just extraneous material. So what I did was I went to the box top. They've got a good picture of it there. Flipped it over, and on the back you can see where that quiver is. It's hanging down around his knee there. You can see that there are these 2 straps that come up to either side. So it's always a good idea to go and look at your miniature's cover when you're assembling it, just to make sure that you don't accidentally get rid of something that is supposed to be there. So in this case, these are not gates, these are actually straps that are going to come up either side of that figure, hold the quiver in place. When I'm looking to glue metal miniature parts together, I will turn to either 2-part epoxy, 5-minute is plenty, or I will turn to a gel super glue. In this case, with this figure, these attachment points are really significant, super substantial. They're pretty small, and they've got good recesses to attach to here in the base. I don't think that epoxy is necessary with this figure. I will turn to epoxy when I really think that a figure needs strength. And this one just doesn't seem to, it doesn't really require that. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead with a gel super glue. Now, what I like to do when using gel super glue, no matter how nice these attachment points are, I will typically come in with a hobby knife and I'll score sort of a waffle pattern into the attachment points. And for me, I do this because it provides just a little bit more tooth for the glue to hang on to once it's setting in place. So I'll do that on the stubs that come out, and then I'll also go ahead and do that in the recesses as well. All right, and again, that's just to give the glue something more to hang on to. So at this point then, with this gel glue, as easy as putting the glue in here and then standing our figure up on the base. Now, I've got him in there, and what I'm going to do is come in with some accelerator and just flow that right in and around his feet because I don't feel like waiting. And look at that. Nice. We've got our figure already standing. Now, moving on to his arms. Now, while this is a pretty good attachment point, got a nice big nub there and a nicely shaped pit for it to move in or to fit into. Just gluing it, that's gonna form a fairly weak joint. When you run into these sort of situations, what you want to do then is pin the joint. To do that, first thing that you want to do is make a little bit of a divot with your knife in the top of the attachment point. Start a hole there. Then, had you get a pin vise with a drill bit, take that then, position it, and then just drill down into the attachment point. Now obviously this is going to create a little bit of metal down in there, but that's okay. Now be careful not to like drill through the side of your part, and just take your time. There's no reason that this has to be, you're not in a race. Okay, so to me, that's deep enough. So then what you want to do is clean that up a little bit, right around the edge there. Take your nail, remember this metal's soft, then double check, make sure that you're fitting okay back into this join. Looks like we're doing all right. Okay, so the test fit works. Now, you can just sort of eyeball it and put a matching hole up in that recess, or what you can do is give yourself a little bit of a guide by using some blue tack or poster putty, putting it in there, and then just fitting your piece up in there. And that'll give you sort of a nub, a little bit of a guide as to where to go ahead and drill your second hole. Go back to it. Now again, on this end, you want to be careful that you're not gonna go through the top of the shoulder or through the top of the piece that you're pinning. So just then come back, clear out any metal fragments or debris that you think you've got in there. Now the next bit is the fun stuff. You get to go ahead and put a pin in there. So this is a 1 millimeter diameter brass rod. So what I'm going to do is just snip off a bit, which is obviously going to be longer than what I need. I'm going to go ahead and put some super glue on the end of it, and then fit that down into that recess. Okay, and just come in and hit it with the accelerator. So now that brass rod has dried, right, and the accelerator that I put around there has evaporated away. So it's in there. It's stuck pretty well. Remember, we didn't drill super deep into that shoulder because we didn't want to pop out the top. So I'm gonna just kind of guess where I'm at right now, right? I'm gonna say that that's about the amount I need. We're gonna test fit it, and if it's still sticking out a little bit too much, then we'll go ahead and we'll trim it down. But what you want to do with these sharp edges, those will interfere. The sharp edges on this brass rod will interfere with you putting it into the hole in the shoulder or in the receiving part, right? So you just want to come in here and just sort of knock down that edge that we just created with the nippers by trimming it. You just want to come in here with the file, and you can really hear that. Round that out a little bit. It's not nearly as sharp. And then test fit it up into that shoulder. Oh, look at that. Practically perfect. Now what's nice about pinning also is that it gives you the ability to, move this a little bit, right? Sort of not necessarily do a huge reposition on it, but maybe get a better position than what that original attachment point was initially providing for you. So again, super glue. I'll go ahead and put it down here. Just make sure not to use too much. And then I will get my accelerator ready. Give it a second to dry. All right, and so that arm is now pinned. And it should have a really good, solid attachment point. I should be able to bump it, and it's not gonna go anywhere. I should be able to you know, handle the figure and not worry about the arm coming off. So do the same thing with the other arm, pin it, and then it's just a matter of doing some of the final detail work to get it all put together. Sometimes you will find on metal figures like this that there's no attachment point at all. And this is a good example of that. This quiver, we know from the box top, is supposed to fit right there. Okay, it's hanging down near his knees. But as you can see, there's just the quiver, its detail, the two straps that come off of it, and then there's just this sort of smooth recessed area there that there's just nothing there. Again, this is a perfect place for you to pin. How would we go about doing that? Same as what we just did with the arm with the bow. You could probably get away with one pin. If you were super concerned that it would come off, you could do two. I'm just gonna do one. That way I can rotate it a bit. Initially on this, I'm gonna put the first hole, I'm gonna drill into his leg, into the miniature's leg, because this is the part that's gonna be sort of moving around, right? I wanna be able to transfer where the hole is there back onto the quiver. So we've got the hole right there, right? So what I'm going to do then is use the same sort of poster putty trick that we did before. I'm going to put it on the quiver here. Kind of give myself a guide as to where I want this pinned. And it gave me just a little bit of a nub there where I'm able to identify where I'm going to be putting the pin. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill that out. Okay, so same sort of idea. I'm just going to go ahead and dab some super glue into this area here where the quiver is going to be, and then basically doing the same thing that we did before. Push that down into place. For this particular model, there are going to be these straps here. They're going to have to be adjusted, right? This one comes down over here. I'm going to bend that into place, trim it as necessary. This one comes down over here. It's going to need to be, you know, pressed into place and trimmed as necessary as well. We just go ahead and continue to work around the model, put the various parts on until it is all put together the way that we want it to be put together. So once you get your metal miniature put together, you're probably going to see that there are places where the parts didn't fit quite as well together as what you had hoped. Just like with plastic models, where you can use putty to fill seams. What we can do is fill those seams, but I prefer to use, on the metal models, 2-part epoxy putty. My favorite is green stuff, which we do sell at the Kallenbach Hobby Store, and you can find in the link below. Green stuff comes with, like all 2-part epoxy putties, the resin and the hardener. What you want to do is you want to cut off 2 equal parts of the resin and hardener and then mix them together. You do not need a ton of this. A little bit of it goes a long way. You mix those together with your fingers. You're probably going to want to have latex or neoprene gloves, especially if you don't know if you're going to have an allergic reaction to this. And it gets sticky very, very fast. So you're going to want to mix those together, and then you're going to want to apply it to your model. You can make very nice contours, natural looking contours with 2-part epoxy putty, green stuff, using just a couple of simple tools that you can pick up, sculpting tools, from an art supply store or even a hobby shop. Some people like to use petroleum jelly as a medium to sort of lubricate the tools while smoothing out and making those contours with the 2-part epoxy putty. I just use water. I'll keep a cup of water nearby and I'll dip the tool in it and then just go ahead and smooth it. Use what works best for you. The epoxy putty will set up in about half hour, 40 minutes, and it's then just a matter of going in and maybe sanding it just a little bit to feather it and then put primer on it. Now, some of you are going to ask, well, what kind of primer can I use on metal miniatures? There's absolutely no reason why you can't go in and use an acrylic primer. If you got a lacquer or an enamel primer, you can use those as well. That's how you assemble metal miniature models. I'm Tim Kidwell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.